Financial freedom is being debt-free by choice because my parents really struggled with being in debt, and I was very aware of it growing up. And if money can fix something, it's not a problem in my life. And so the tire blows, whatever, we buy a new tire. But if we haven't learned anything these last 2 years around how valuable our health is, how valuable our happiness is, how life is meant to feel good and not just look good, then we really missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is wild, though. Because, I mean, we grew up in a family where, like, Red Lobster was a real big deal.
Yeah.
And you get no beverages, no dessert, and you split a meal.
No, you get the beverage, but it's got to be a refill beverage.
Yeah.
And then you keep filling it up to get as much out of that restaurant you could. It's just like Dr. Pepper land. You just keep filling it up. But,
yeah. So
free refills was where I went.
Yeah. So it's exciting to like live in a life where it's like, yeah, I can buy the $10 green juice. To me, that feels like success more than any other thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, how does the money, the psychology of the money, then influence the relationship in a certain way? Now that you have been the one, you both kind of are at the similar level, and now it's like, okay, your business has been earning an abundance of wealth for the family, and you're the one who's been creating and generating that, not him. How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, I mean, he has access to everything. He has passwords to everything. It's just this level of trust, and we have a lot of conversations around it, but they're not like heated, where it's just like, here's where we're at. He's on all the investment calls. He's a big part of like figuring out our will. So it's really not a thing.
It's not an issue. There's nothing.
No. And it's really, and I think too, because we live in a place of like abundance, like where, and not in like a woo-woo way, but like in a way of like, we have more than we ever dreamed possible, and we're awake to that. It's just like, there's never pressure on me to perform more or earn more. It's like this beautiful, like,
and he's not driven to need more. So he's happy with.
We're so content.
He's chill, so it's not like he's driven for more, and he's happy you're making this or less. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
We're very much just like at peace in our lives, and I think too the Midwest keeps us really grounded.
Yeah,
I'm really thankful we still live there. Which so for so many years, so many of my friends would be like, "What are you doing? Like, come to LA, come to New York. What are you doing?" And it's fascinating when I'm in places like this because they really drain my energy. Just the city energy. I'm like hearing sirens. I'm like, traffic is like, it takes you 45 minutes to get 3 miles. Like it's a different way of living. It's not a wrong way of living. It's just not for me. Like I prefer being in the woods overlooking a lake and working wherever my laptop is. So
the idea of that is like this fantasy that maybe one day I would like that. But also going somewhere and having no activity, after 3 days I'd be like, I'm bored. That's what I would feel this season of life. But maybe one day I'd be like, that's all I want.
You know what I think is interesting though about that? It's like, a lot of people like they'd be like, if I had $1 million, I'd like retire and go to an island. And it's like we know ourselves. Like we like to make an impact. We like to work. We like to create. And I think a lot of times, too, the thought of, like, being in a cabin in the woods freaks people out because they're afraid to be quiet with themselves. It's really easy to drown out your worries, your traumas, when it's just busy, busy, busy. And I think what's really fascinating, and, like, part of why I wrote my book is that during the pandemic, a lot of us had to live up to what we said we would do when time slowed down. I mean, how many times have we said, I'll work out more, I'll eat better, I'll write the book, I'll read the book, when life slows down. And literally, life never slowed down for any of us until the pandemic. And I think a lot of us had to look ourselves in the mirror and be like, am I who I said I'd be? Because now I've been given, and if you were fortunate, you were given the gift of time. If you weren't fortunate, you were out there on the workforce still, or scrambling to survive. And so I want to, respect that there was different ends of the pandemic and it looked very different. But there is a vast majority of people who were now not commuting, had more time in the day.
Saving their time from that.
Yeah. Who were they during that time, and could they be still with themselves to face it? And so it's kind of that difference between how are you and how are you really, in that it's like you're inviting in that breath of like, who am I really, you know?
Sure. Maybe one day. But I've been looking at houses like a little bit outside of LA, not that far, like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
With like a yard, you know?
Yeah. You kind of like, I mean, that's what's so wild to me here. It's just like we want like space and privacy and woods and quiet and like you let the dog out the back door and the kids run around and play in the streams and stuff. And I think too, it's like
that's like my childhood, you know. That was my childhood.
That's what I was gonna say.
It's like a big backyard and the big tree that you're climbing.
Building a dam in the stream for hours.
Picking up crawfish in the stream. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Crawdaddy life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We would go under the bridge like down the road and
that was life.
Yeah.
It was life, but I guess that could be life again. One day.
I'll get you.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I have a fantasy of like wanting to go back to Ohio sometime and getting a place there. But then I go visit in the winter and I'm like, I don't miss the winter.
Then just don't go in the winter.
Right. So but then the summer, there's mosquitoes and humidity and I don't miss sweating all day.
Yeah, if you're off of Lake Superior, we don't get that as bad. So
there's tons of mosquitoes up there though, right?
We haven't had them bad.
Really?
Because we're right off of the lake.
Minnesota, there's tons of them though.
Yeah.
In
general.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyways, I'm really excited about this book and excited about everything you're up to. I think if people are, and really the podcast, which you've been doing for many years now, has been about marketing business and building this business around your lifestyle, which I think is really inspiring. I'm curious for people that aren't entrepreneurs or that haven't done entrepreneurial things, because you and I weren't entrepreneurs.
Right.
We kind of became one.
Yep.
For me, I felt like it was out of necessity at the season of my life, even though I didn't feel like I wanted to become one.
Yep.
It was never like a desire, really.
Yep.
But it felt like I just was kind of forced into it, or there was a necessity to it. For those that maybe feel like they might have something they want to put out there and build, but they're scared.
Yeah.
Should they just go for it? Should they test something first and try to get a few sales in something? What do you think is the best approach now in today's time?
So I talk a lot about how I sometimes don't necessarily know what I want, but I know what I don't want.
Which is what?
Like when I was in corporate America, I sat down at a table just like this, and my boss said, here's your 5-year plan. They never once asked me, what do you want? What's your next move? Where do you want to go? And I wanted to go to corporate. Like I wanted to move back to Minnesota, be in Minneapolis. But here I was in a store, a glorified HR person that had to bring the garbage to the dumpster at the end of the night, wearing red and khaki, which by the way, I hate red and khaki. And sometimes I think that people get really lost because they're like, well, yeah, if I knew what my passion was, I could go figure out a way to make money, but I don't even know what my passion is, right? And sometimes I think knowing what you don't want is just as important as knowing what you do want.
Right.
And sometimes it's an easier place to start with. Like, I don't want 10 vacation days a year. I don't want to work weekends and nights. Like, you know, and so it's like trying to figure those things out. But the other piece of that is that we have to like start to be open in saying, I've changed.
Right.
I'm evolving.
Maybe I wanted this thing for a while, but now I want something different. Yeah.
It's like we get so attached to our identities that the thought of like saying, oh, I'm different, or I know I said I wanted this, but it doesn't feel the way I thought it would, and so I want to pursue something different. It's like there's this notion, Dr. Maya Shankar was on my podcast, and she talks about identity foreclosure, and it's like, the reason why you hold on to jeans that don't fit you anymore because you remember how you invested in them, or the reason why you get the degree even though 3 years into it you know that you don't want to do the profession. It's this idea of like, so I got to make it worth something, but instead then we're wasting our future, right? And so
you call it identity closure?
Identity foreclosure. Like as in I'm foreclosing this piece of me. I am shutting it down because I am no longer who I was. And it's fascinating because even being here with you today, having a book coming out, you're seeing a changed mind.
Yeah, you didn't want to do this
at all. I mean, you are the one person who truly witnessed how much I said I wouldn't do this.
Yeah, you're like, just go launch a course and make a bunch more money and have less stress.
Yeah, I mean, totally.
Yeah.
And so it's like we are so afraid of changing, and not just changing, which is scary and uncertain, we're afraid of people seeing us change. We're afraid of being like, I know I said this one thing, but I don't believe it anymore.
Yes.
And I think that change is like growth and evolution. And like we're in this thing called life school, school of greatness, life school, where we are learning. And if we're not learning and evolving, like, what are we doing? We're missing this opportunity. But I would say for those people who are like, maybe I have this idea or whatever, do it as an experiment.
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're gonna love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video.
Don't attach money to it.
Yes.
Don't attach deadlines. Look at how I wrote the book. Do it in a way that proves to yourself that, one, you're capable of taking action, but in a way that doesn't necessarily paint things as like black and white success and failure. Look at everything as an experiment. I'm going to try this thing. All it's going to do is yield a result, and that result is going to guide my next step.
Yes.
And I feel like nowadays it's like we have to like define, is this a success or is it a failure? No. I've done many things and failed. I've tried many different things and been like, oh, that was not, like I did senior portraits one year because I was like, I can make bank shooting seniors. I hated it.
Yeah.
Did it for one summer. I was like, never again. Was it a failure? No way. It was just a point on the path that was guiding me forward. And so I feel like getting really open to like trying things. And the other part of that is that every single time I've tried something different, it's always been a side hustle. I've not abandoned the 9 to 5 to jump all in on something. I've used the 9 to 5 to fuel the other something. Then when I did courses, I used the courses to fuel the podcast. And when I did the podcast, it's like they all pour into each other. And it's like we're so quick to neglect something because it wasn't the perfect fit, when it's like that can propel you forward if you lean on it. And it'll give you this ability to not feel the desperation that makes us say yes to the wrong things or do things that were never meant for us.
Right, absolutely. What was the biggest identity foreclosure you've had in the last few years?
Getting rid of my Abercrombie jeans from when I was 18. Truly, I remember how expensive those suckers were and how I saved every pretty penny. And I told myself someday they'll fit again. And guess what? They don't. And they're not even in style anymore. But I've literally, that was part of it. But I think for me, moving back home, which is something, so Drew and I met in college in Wisconsin, lived in Wisconsin for over a decade and moved back home to Duluth, Minnesota. And, one, I never thought I'd move home. There's just something about it where it was like, the people that are there are still doing the same things.
Right.
Still the same people.
Different mindsets, stuck in the ways or whatever, yeah.
And I had noticed a trend, and I'm curious, like when you go back to Ohio, if you like stay where you grew up, like do you kind of revert to your old self?
A little bit, yeah. I really love it though, because I do, because I'll hang out at the restaurants and I'll like just talk to the people just like I'm there. Yeah. Like I'm from there.
Yeah. It was funny though, because I like, whenever I would go home, like in college, I'd like find myself like sleeping on the couch again and watching MTV and eating ramen noodles and like things that were not a part of who I was, but like there was just this like comfort of like, this is what I do. I never thought I'd move back home, and I had this vision. After our second loss, I like hired someone to like help me unpack the grief, because I skipped like denial and went straight to anger after our second loss. Because I just was like, what is wrong with me? Why is this happening? I was very public about our first loss and felt like there was purpose there.
Yes. The second one, you were like, this is frustration and anger.
Yeah, and I was like,
I got the lesson already. I don't need this again.
Right. Yeah. And I was like praying to God, like, where is your redemption song? Because I want to like prove how great you are. And now you've let me down again. And like, I don't even know where to go from here. And I hired this person to like help me unpack my grief, because I was like, I'm angry. I hate my body. I don't know what to do. And she like led me through this exercise, and we were like sitting together, and we would get on the phone once a week. And every time I wanted to like hit ignore, like I was just like, didn't want to do the call.
Deal with it, yeah.
Yeah, because I was just like, I know this is going to suck. And we're like on the phone, and she's like, okay, we're going to do a little exercise, and I want for you to close your eyes and like breathe. And her name is Erin Trelor, and she runs a really cool Instagram called Raw Beauty Talks, and it's all about like coming back to your body. And so she's like having me breathe, and she's like, I want for you to envision like the most vibrant version of yourself. Like you are happy and energized and alive. And it didn't just stop at like the vision. She's like, you know, like put your fingers in your finger slots, like step into your feet. Like I want for you to be there and like feel what it feels to like be fully alive and to enjoy your life. And she said this line, and it was like a dial on a stereo, I want for you to turn your intuition up and turn the noise of the world down. And I was like envisioning all of this. And in the vision, I saw this little girl and pancakes and a Persian rug, and I was wearing jeans and a white linen shirt. And I opened my eyes after the vision. I was like bawling. And I said to her, she goes, you know, what came up for you? And I was like, I think we have to move. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I love the house we're in, but there's this bedroom, and it was always going to be our baby's bedroom. I get so emotional, but then I'm like, every time I walk by it, I just think about what hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, this vision of like this long table and like this rug and this baby, and like I see it. And I was like, I think we've got to move. And that day, because I'm a quick action taker.
You're like looking at houses. You're like,
literally,
you're finding an agent. Yes.
I get on Zillow and I type in Duluth, Minnesota.
Wow.
And Drew and I had never talked about moving home. Like it was like maybe we'll move to Minneapolis someday, like, you know, kind of stay in the city.
Where were you living at this time?
We were in a really small town in Wisconsin called Fort Atkinson. And we had great friends and stuff, but we didn't have the support of a family. And I found this house on Zillow, and I text my family text thread as a joke and say, maybe this will be the Kutcher Craftsman. Like, it was this beautiful home in Minnesota. We had never talked about it. Drew is out on a run, and his phone starts blowing up because my family's like, move home, move home.
He's like, what? We never talked about this.
Yeah, he gets home, and he's like, what is going on in your family text thread? Like, it's going crazy. And I was like, did you see the listing? And he's like, what listing? And I was like, I saw this house in Minnesota, and I thought he would be like, you know, maybe 3 years from now. And he was like, oh, we could do that. And I was like, what? And, you know, it's crazy because I didn't necessarily move because of the vision, but it was like the first thing where I was like, you know, where we are is not working for me. The craziest part is this, Lewis. We didn't move for like 7-8 months. The day after we moved in, I took a positive pregnancy test.
Wow.
It was literally, I like always say, I'm like, it's like I would like had to move home and like be grounded at home. Like it just felt like this like crazy moment where it was like, I'm home and I'm ready and like, this is it.
And that next day you moved in. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
When was this?
April 1st of 2017.
Oh my gosh.
Or 2018, yeah. So it was like.
It's like right after the mastermind it was that next year.
And it was like, and here's the thing that's so wild about my journey, because, you know, 1 in 4 women experiences pregnancy loss, is that when you're in it, I mean, it is dark.
I can imagine.
And I often think about, it's like if you were like walking through like a warehouse and it's just like pitch black and you're literally just like inching step by step, like you don't know where you're going. And it's like you have a flashlight so you can only see like directly in front of you. And once you get through it, it's like somebody turned the lights on and you see where you were and why you were there. And I hate the line, like, everything happens for a reason, because when you are in it, there is zero reason why. Yeah, there's no reason why that happened. But our, like, 3-year waiting season, I can see now, with hindsight, was required for me to build a life that supported what I was waiting for.
Really?
When I first was pregnant with my first pregnancy, I was shooting 25 weddings a year. I remember we were in Hawaii and I looked up the due date and I was like, I can't be due then. I have like 4 more weddings. I mean, I like have to cancel on these. I literally was like.
It's like you were sabotaging your body.
It was like I didn't know how I would do it. You know what I mean?
Your body's like, we're not gonna let you do it then.
Yeah, like it's crazy. And then the second time around was a huge wake-up call because I found out that I had lost the baby, but my body was still pregnant, and I had to show up and shoot a wedding the next day.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had to pretend like I was the happy wedding photographer.
Man.
And so when I look at those losses, they were massive teachers in my life. But by the time I was pregnant for the third time, I had built a life where I was able to move and I wasn't tied to anything and I had no clients to answer to, and I had built that. And so there's this quote that I heard from a preacher, and it's like, sometimes the season of waiting is just as important as what it is that we're waiting for. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people find themselves in seasons of waiting, and it's really easy to want to like twiddle your thumbs and just sit there, right? Like just wait and wait and wait. But I think we waste it. And it's like, I worked while I waited, and I don't mean like I hustled. I worked towards the life I wanted for when the time came. Mm-hmm. And it was so evident when it happened. Being the helper is transforming lives.
Yes.
And it's really interesting because I feel like I've discovered that in business, and this goes for you as well, is like there are very few things that only Lewis can do. Mm-hmm. You have to be the face and the voice and the vision, right? You are the visionary, but your team are like the missionaries.